The morning sun painted Oak Ridge in golden hues as Vanessa Mitchell's feet found their familiar rhythm on the pavement. At 55, her silver blonde ponytail caught the light like spun silk, and her breath came in steady clouds in the crisp air. This daily ritual wasn't just exercise, it was meditation, sanctuary, the one constant in a life that had transformed beyond recognition. As she rounded the corner toward Miller Park, memories whispered with each footstep. She could still feel the sting of those early days, the lone officers who spoke to her like a child, the dismissive glances when she'd walked into banks wearing her best dress that wasn't quite good enough. Her small bookstore had been just a dream then, and she'd been just another woman deemed worthy of investment. The bright yellow notice on the community bulletin board shattered her peaceful reverie like glass. Oak Ridge Community Bank a closure notice. Her heart clenched as she read the cold, corporate language. 30 days. They were giving this community's financial lifeline just 30 days to die. Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she dialed Richard's number, the notice still clutched in her other hand. Through the phone, she could hear the familiar sounds of his office keyboards clicking, voices discussing millions as casually as others discussed the weather. But she also heard something else, the immediate shift in his tone when he recognized the emotion in her voice. "It's not just about the money," she found herself explaining, though Richard hadn't asked. "It's about Mrs. Henderson, who at 87 still walks here every Friday because this place knows her name. It's about Sam Torres, whose restaurant dream became reality because someone here saw past his broken English to his determination." As she hung up, Vanessa felt the familiar fire ignite in her chest, the same flame that had driven her to succeed when everyone said she couldn't, that had made her fight for every small victory in those early years. Some battles, she realized, never truly end, they just take new forms. The bank's marble lobby felt like a cathedral of judgment, all polished surfaces and hushed whispers. Vanessa's running shoes squeaked softly against the floor, a sound that seemed to announce her unworthiness to every person in their pressed suits and practiced smiles. The receptionist's eyes traveled from Vanessa's baseball cap to her athletic clothes, and in that single glance, Vanessa saw her own past reflected back. How many times had she stood in similar lobbies, dressed in her best but still found wanting? How many dreams had died in rooms like this, killed not by lack of vision but by lack of perceived respectability? "Can I help you?" The question dripped with the kind of politeness that wasn't polite at all, the tone reserved for those who didn't belong, who were tolerated rather than welcomed. Vanessa straightened her shoulders, feeling 15 years of success strengthen her spine. She belonged here not because of what she wore, but because of what she carried inside: dignity, purpose, and the hard-won knowledge that worth isn't measured in thread count. Patricia Kensington's handshake was as brief as her patience, her smile as cold as the marble beneath their feet. As they walked toward her office, Vanessa felt the weight of every gaze, heard the barely suppressed snickers, sensed the entertainment she was providing simply by existing in this space while dressed for comfort rather than conquest. "Purchase?" Patricia's laugh rang through the lobby like breaking glass. "Ma'am, banks aren't like grocery stores. You can't just walk in and buy them. Especially not." The pause hung in the air like smoke, thick with unspoken judgment. "Someone like me," Vanessa finished, her voice steady despite the familiar ache in her chest. She'd heard these words before, felt this dismissal, lived this moment in a dozen different rooms, with 100 different faces. But time and success had taught her something precious. Their inability to see her worth said everything about them, and nothing about her. The employees gathered like spectators at a circus, feeding off the entertainment of watching someone they deemed beneath them reach for something beyond their station. Vanessa felt their amusement like tiny cots, each snicker a reminder of how quickly humans can turn cruel when they feel superior. Patricia's office felt like a fishbowl, all glass walls and transparent intentions. Vanessa wasn't offered a seat, a small cruelty that spoke volumes about respect withheld. The branch manager positioned herself behind her massive desk like a queen holding court, ready to dispense judgment on this inappropriately dressed peasant. $12 million, Patricia announced, watching Vanessa's face for the expected shock, the inevitable retreat. Do you have that kind of capital available? But Vanessa had learned something in her years of building an empire: never let them see you shrink. 15 million, she replied simply, watching Patricia's expression shift from amusement to confusion to something approaching concern. Through the glass walls, she could see more employees gathering, drawn by the spectacle. Someone made a joke about armored cars, another about garage sales, and with each laugh, Vanessa felt the old wounds reopen. But beneath the pain lay something stronger, resolve forged in similar fires, dignity that no amount of mockery could diminish. The laughter followed Vanessa like a cruel soundtrack as security approached. She'd been here before, not literally, but emotionally. Standing in rooms where her worth was questioned, her dreams dismissed, her very presence treated as an inconvenience to be managed and removed. Think she knows the difference between $1 million and $1 billion? The stage whisper cut through the air, and Vanessa felt something inside her crystallize. This wasn't just about her anymore, or even about the bank. This was about every person who'd ever been judged by their clothes instead of their character, dismissed by their appearance instead of their ability. James Wilson's arrival brought a new player to the stage, but the script remained the same. More expensive suit, broader smile, deeper condescension. He looked at her like a curiosity, a story he'd tell at dinner parties about the delusional woman who thought she could buy a bank while wearing running shoes. Banking is serious business, he declared, as if seriousness could only be measured in dress codes and appointment books. We're not selling lemonade stands here. The front doors of the bank swung open with theatrical timing, and Richard Mitchell entered like a force of nature. Vanessa felt the familiar warmth that came with his presence, not because he was her salvation, but because he was partnership made manifest. Proof that love could transcend every boundary society tried to impose. The silence that fell was deafening. She watched faces transform in real time as recognition dawned, as the impossible became suddenly, terrifyingly possible. James Wilson's confident smirk melted like ice in summer, replaced by the desperate scrambling of someone who'd just realized they'd been mocking the giant while standing in its shadow. Your wife. Patricia's voice cracked on the words, her eyes darting between Vanessa's casual attire and Richard's unmistakable presence. The cognitive dissonance was almost comic, their carefully constructed worldview crumbling in the face of reality they couldn't reshape or dismiss. But this wasn't about Richard's arrival changing everything. This was about their prejudice being exposed, their assumptions revealed as the hollow judgments they'd always been. Would it have changed how you treated her? Richard's question hung in the air like a sword, sharp and unavoidable. Vanessa watched the employees shift uncomfortably, their earlier bravado evaporating as they realized the entertainment had become evidence of their character. Patricia's attempt at damage control was painful to witness, the same smile that had been condescending now pleading, the same voice that had dripped with disdain now desperately professional. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, she said, but they all knew the only misunderstanding had been about Vanessa's net worth, not her treatment. $1 million discount, Richard announced casually. Seems fair considering the hospitality my wife received. The words landed like stones in still water, each ripple carrying the weight of consequence. Vanessa felt a complex mix of vindication and sadness. She'd been right to come here, right to stand her ground, but the victory felt hollow when built on others' embarrassment. She'd wanted to save the bank for the community's sake, not to prove a point about respect, though perhaps the two weren't mutually exclusive. Standing in that marble lobby, surrounded by people who minutes before had treated her as less than human, Vanessa felt the weight of teaching moments. She could have left in triumphant silence, could have let revenge speak through lawyers and acquisition papers. Instead, She chose something harder, truth delivered with grace. My husband and I could purchase this bank 10 times over without noticing the expense, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hushed room. But that's not why I came here today. She spoke of Mrs. Henderson, of Sam Torres, of all the people who would suffer when corporate efficiency replaced community connection. But more than that, she spoke to the deeper wound, the casual cruelty that turned financial institutions into fortresses, keeping out anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of worthy. Nancy Winter's voice from behind the teller counter was like a lifeline in turbulent water. Not all of us, she said, and Vanessa heard genuine remorse, authentic humanity trying to surface through institutional callousness. It was exactly why this place was worth saving, not for the building or the business model, but for the people who still remembered that banking was about human beings, not just numbers. The morning air felt different as Vanessa and Richard walked away from the bank, crisp with possibility and change. Behind them, she knew, a reckoning was beginning, not just with acquisition papers and employment contracts, but with the harder questions about how we treat each other, how we measure worth, how we choose to see or ignore the humanity in every person who walks through our doors. So much for my peaceful morning run, Vanessa said, squeezing Richard's hand as they reached her original jogging route. But even as she spoke, she felt something settling in her chest, not peace exactly, but purpose fulfilled. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from unexpected teachers, Richard replied, and Vanessa knew he wasn't talking about her teaching the bank employees. She was thinking about what they'd taught her, that success, real success, wasn't measured in zeros on bank statements but in the courage to stand for something beyond yourself, especially when you stood alone. As they reached the bulletin board where this all began, Vanessa realized the yellow notice would come down soon, replaced by something better. Not just a bank saved, but a community reminded that dignity isn't negotiable, respect isn't conditional, and sometimes the most important battles are fought not in boardrooms but in marble lobbies by women in running shoes who refuse to be invisible. The morning sun climbed higher, casting new shadows, and Vanessa Mitchell smiled. Her real run was just beginning.